時45分からindie.net から、JavaScript Lab for Power Hackers という、プレゼンテーションをやっていきたいと思います。つまり、パールハッカーのための、JavaScript Lab というプレゼンテーションです。You have the floor.
Thank you. Well, I'm just... Hey! So, hi everybody. I'm going to give a talk about JavaScript love for Perl hackers. And, let's see. Uh-oh. No love. Oh, I'm in Instream. So, hey Dan.
Hey!
I wouldn't want to start with that dance putting me up and everything. So, hi everybody, I'm Ingy.net. I'm going to give a talk about, this is for you Dan, JavaScript love for Perl hackers. Okay, so my name is Ingy.net, or it's Ingy.net, 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 Ingy. I've gotten mail delivered to me as every one of these except for one. You can probably guess which one. Okay. Any questions?
What's your name again?
You can call me sir. Well, actually, good God, I hope you guess my name. Okay, today I'm going to talk about a few things. Vroom. I'll show you that. You're actually watching Vroom right now. Vroom, vroom. pQuery. This, pQuery DOM. Something I call zhongbai.pm. Probably pronounced that wrong. And js.pm. So, okay, first I'll talk about Vroom. So Vroom has nothing to do with JavaScript, but it has everything to do with love. So, and it's about not just JavaScript, but JavaScript love. So Vim is Vim love for Yapcasia speakers. So I gave a talk in Taipei recently, and I just got really depressed. I'm like, I don't want to have to write more slides. I'm like, screw it, I just won't write slides. I'll just go in Vim, show people some Perl source code of what I'm working on. And then I was like, well, hey, Vim would be a nice kind of slide presentation thing. So, and then I had 4 hours to give my talk, so I spent 3 hours writing the slide software, 1 hour writing the talk, and then, well, in Taipei, Gugat always interprets for me. So people always laugh at my whole talk, but only after Gugat actually translates it. So I don't really know what he's telling them. But they seem to enjoy it, probably at my expense. So no HTML, no pictures, just text and some Vim files. These are all the file numbers down in the bottom corner in a Vimrc. So I hit spacebar, it goes forward. I hit backspace, and it goes backwards. It's very cool. Oh, and then if I get some Perl I want to show, then I just tack a little .pl onto the end of the file name, and then I get syntax highlighting for free. And then if I hit capital R, then it just runs it. Oh, there's compile error, so I go fix the compile error on the fly, you know. Okay, let's try Shift R again. Hey, and there's all of a dump of @ink. So that's pretty cool. I uploaded it to CPAN this morning. It's on CPAN, and I'm going to show you how it works real quick. So I'm going to hit Q to get out. So I just have this directory, and you can see I have all these slide things, and then the important thing is that I have this slides.vroom. Now, they're all separated with these dashes, and then some options follow off of this. So this is just a config. It has the title that's down there at the bottom. It has my width and height, so I can kind of center stuff. And then these are just some notes I wrote to myself before I was writing the talk, so I just had to skip those all together. This stuff got centered. The lists automatically get indented, but you can override that. And and if you want to separate and do animations, you just put a plus before everything that you want to be on kind of a different file, and it'll divide the file up to the next plus, 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 like that. So it looks like it's animated. The Perl code, I just say, in this case, I just say Perl, and then the I10 is just a way of saying indent it 10. So if I don't have any here docs or whatever, I just like to indent it. It looks better on the slide. And that's pretty much it. Oh, and the equal signs are for titles, and those just kind of center the title on the slide. But the best part of Vroom is how you start it. So you just have you create this slide stat Vroom, and then you just type Vroom, Vroom, and off you go. Woohoo! So let me get back to where we were. Okay, so now I'll talk about pQuery. So everybody loves jQuery. Who here has used jQuery? Okay, so not everybody's used jQuery, but if you use JavaScript and use jQuery, then you'd really love it. So trust me. They say programming is in JavaScript without jQuery is kind of like programming in Perl without Moose. So you know what I'm talking about, right? It'd be like it's basically like programming in JavaScript like 20 years ago or something. I think it's more of it's less of like JavaScript animations and more of just like a core language, making your code a lot shorter because it has this iterator each that it's hard to explain. But I'll show you how to use it in Perl. How many people know Perl? Nobody knows Perl? What language do you program in? You. Do you know Perl, JavaScript? What do you use? Here? Okay, so this, I see, it's a PHP crowd. Well, I did not tune my slides. But I don't even know the first. Good God, can you help me out? You wrote some PHP back in the 70s, didn't you? All right. Okay, so here's how jQuery kind of works. You're in JavaScript, and you just give it this selector in it. The selector ends up looking like some CSS and some XPath. It's very intuitive. And what that does is it goes into the DOM and gets a bunch of DOM elements that match that selector, and it creates an array and puts it in this jQuery object. So the jQuery thing returns an object, and then you can call an action on that object, and it will call the action on everything that's in the array. So if you have 300 elements in your jQuery object, and you want to put a click on every one of them, you just say click in the function once, and then it appends the click onto every one, and then it returns the original object so you can do something else with it. So you can chain all this stuff together. So you can say action, action, and then the real magic of jQuery is it has this each function that just basically applies a subroutine to each of the elements. Now I think it's the coolest thing is when my jQuery object has nothing in it, because I don't have to write any code to say, oh, if you actually found something, do it. It just applies it to everything in the jQuery object, which happens to be nothing, so it does nothing. And I don't have to worry about, edge case code in that case. And then after the each, it returns the jQuery object, and you can just go ahead and do more actions. So everything I just said in that last slide, got a little ahead of myself. Okay, so pQuery is a port of jQuery to Perl. And it's literally just a port. I just sat there and I looked at a line of JavaScript and I'm like, okay, here's how you do that in Perl. And I just went through about, 500, 600, 700 lines of JavaScript and just ported it all to Perl, and then it just all works, wrote a few tests and whatnot. So, but I didn't port all of the stuff. So obviously you can think of things if you use JavaScript, there's all this make the thing go zzz, zzz, and flash and move around and all that stuff. I didn't do any of the animations or the UI stuff. I just did the selector and the DOM manipulation stuff. But that means, well, I'll show you what it means. And probably most importantly, I have this each function. Okay. So here's a little example in Perl. In pQuery, in Perl, you don't really have a DOM to start with. There's not a DOM already loaded. So The pQuery object, if you just give it a URL or the name of a file that ends in .html, then it will just load that from the net or from your disk and create a DOM for you. And then you can do all the normal stuff you would expect to do in jQuery. So in this case, I Googled for Ingi. So if we go over and look at this page, I had to save all this stuff because you know the network is complete bullets in here, right? So there we go, Google Ingi. So I just wanted to get this list and then print it off nice and in terminal. So what I did was I looked for all the H2s. I played around with some Firebug stuff, and I found, okay, the interesting stuff is in the H2, so I'll find the H2s, and then for each of those, I'm going to call this subroutine. Now, two things get passed to each invocation of the subroutine, and it's very similar to what jQuery does. In jQuery, it passes the 0 through n for the number of the element that you're on, and then in the variable this, which is kind of like self in Perl, is the current DOM object that you're manipulating. So in our case, I'm like, well, I'll just put it in $_ because that's a lot more useful than having these little short functions where you have to say myself equals shift. And I hate that stuff. It's not very spiffy. So anyway, and then this is a really common idiom inside of jQuery is you actually will say jQuery this because you're handed a list of DOM elements, but you want to turn them back into jQuery objects so you can do interesting things with them. And all you have to do is have another constructor here that says, okay, and then this says just give me the text. So let's run this with the old run command. And there we go. So that's the top 10 lists, Google list of Ingi stuff. So what is good? What is pQuery good for? So pQuery has one thing that jQuery will never have. Can anybody guess what that is? Yes, it is Perl. I can pretty much guarantee jQuery is never going to have a Perl interpreter built into it. So I suggested the idea on their mailing list, and they were just like, not too interested. Okay, so basically, what I've used it for so far is a really easy way to get stuff from web pages and do interesting stuff with it. So scraping web pages, and also if you want to do DOM manipulation server side, it's really useful for that too. Okay, so here's another example. Oh, this is going to tell me how many modules I have on CPAN. So we go over here and we look, and I basically just looked. I'm like, okay, we got this table. So if I just count the rows in this table, except for this first row here, then I'll pretty much have the. So I'm going to take this. This is the table 1 or table 0, and this is table 1, and I'm going to get all of the rows except for the first one in table 1. So let's go back and look at the code. Okay, so this is a typical jQuery selector. I'm selecting all of the tables, but then I say equals 1 will just give me the second one. And then I'm selecting all of the rows, but I do them greater than 0. So that's going to give me every one except the first one. And basically, this pQuery is going to be an array of all of the DOM elements, which are TRs from that document. And so if I just take the size of that, that should be the number of Perl module distributions I have on CPAN. So let's run this, and it says, okay, Ingi has 89 Perl module distributions on CPAN. Now I did a little work because I don't remember that I actually had 89. I thought I had a few less, and it turns out if I'm a co-maintainer of some modules, it also shows up on that list. So it's not completely accurate. I don't want to get Simon worrying that I was approaching his. I don't even know who's up. Yeah. So, okay, and here was something that Gugad suggested offhandedly one day, and then I went ahead and I'm like, oh, that's just too good of an idea. We got to add that. So this is where pQuery goes above jQuery by just capitalizing all of its letters. So there's a. Okay, so jQuery can only work on one DOM at a time, which makes sense because you only have one DOM to work on when you're in the browser. and you're executing a JavaScript environment. But in Perl, we're not limited to that. So Gugad was like, well, what if you could just have multiple DOMs and be applying all this stuff to all the DOMs at once? I'm like, wow, that's a great idea. So I'm like, okay, we'll have the giant pQuery constructor, and it will be an array of DOMs. So pQuery, the small pQuery is just a array of DOM elements, and pQuery is the array of DOMs. And so all of the methods are the same, except they get kind of auto-loaded and run through, and each iterator that applies them to all of the objects. So it works out pretty cool. I'll show you an example. Okay, here we go. So this example is the exact same as the last one, except in this case I'm creating an array of URLs, right? So I didn't want to be online, so I just cached all of these. So I got Gugad, Ingi, and Miyagawa's search pages, and then I'll create a giant pQuery array of all of those DOMs. So now I have 3 DOMs loaded. Then I'm going to call the find method. Now that's going to get applied to each one and keep the data local to whatever pQuery object it is. Now I have this giant each thing right here. $_ in this sense is now pointing, instead of a DOM element, it's pointing at a pQuery object. So that's the only difference there. And I added this special URL method so that you could pull in the URL that you use to actually get that DOM. It was kind of sitting back in the object. And you might, if you actually were really thinking about it, you'd think, well, where do you put that, since the DOM is an array, or the element, the objects are arrays, and I kind of do this lexical goofiness. But anyway, so I take that URL, I strip off all the stuff that I just put on up here, so I end up with Gugad, Ingi, and Miyagawa again, and then I just print out how many cPy modules they have, and I'll run it, and okay, pretty cool. So now you could actually write some Perl one-liners to go spider the whole web, and do cool stuff, and it would never run because until Damien gets that super cool Ion computer or whatever he's working on. Okay. Okay. So any questions on the pQuery stuff? This is where it gets. Any laughs? Okay. No problem. Okay. So for the last 5 years, I've gone to Yapsi Asia, and then for the last 3 years, Yapsi Asia has been Yapsi Tokyo. But for the first 2, it was Taiwan. And I always go to Taiwan now and hang out with Gugad before and after these Yapsis. And every year, I try to learn a little bit more Chinese language. So, not as good as Larry yet, but coming along. I just use the Japanese. So this year, I decided, well, it'd be a lot easier if I could learn a language in the environment that I understand and work in all the time, which is Perl. So, so I wrote some Perl stuff to help me learn Chinese. Okay. So I have this thing that I call Zhang Bei. Now Zhang is kind of like the first half of Zhongwen, which is Chinese, written Chinese, and then Bei is like some clam or something, I guess, right? So I have the Zhang shell. And it's a Perl script that uses this Perl module called zhangbei.pm. And I actually named it this and stored it like this on the disk, and it uses Vim for its interface, just like this slideshow does. It's pretty cool. So I'm going to show you that, but I'm going to sit down first. I don't know what that was, but it's blown up. Seems pretty cool. All right, let me get out of here. Okay. Right, so if we were to do a find in this directory, we'd see all this crazy files that I have. And then basically it all uses this script, which is pretty cool. I just use zhongbei, and then I call zhongbei new run. It works, and then so that module is defined here. And I want to show you a little bit because I actually have a really neat use of pquery, which we all understand now. So that actually runs all this. But first, I just want to run it and show you how it kind of works. So I'll just run it. Then there we go. Okay. So now I'm in Vim again, and I'm in the file called data help welcome. And I have a special vimrc file so that when I go and put my mouse over help and I hit enter, then I go to the help index. And if I want to see what the key bindings are here, I can get to that. If I want to go back, I hit the capital B. Okay, so these are the places where I'm getting all my information. And here we are back at the welcome screen. Now I usually go into the categories thing, so I like to put my words in categories. So I have some animals here, and so I go to the cow, and then I have this file. So that's, new is the word for cow. And I'm always looking for beef noodle shops, so it's good that I know that. But actually, if I hit the capital Y, I collected the data from some website, and it came up with 3 entries. And I'm like, well, this is the word that's always in the beef noodle soup, so that's the one that I want. I don't really want to be concerned with these others for now until I get around and I need them for some reason. So I hide all this stuff, and I keep it cached here, and so I can kind of manipulate this stuff. So I hit Y again, and this is just a rendering of it. So so you see we're in data English cow. If I go hit the equal sign, that goes back here. There's the cow. But now this is actually stored in data Zhongwan Niu, so which is actually a completely different file. And this has, you can see that's a different YAML file altogether. So basically, I have these different ways of looking. I don't know if I have to hit the web, it's just going to fail. Not that. Okay, so now I'm in the pinyin part. So with Chinese, they use this pinyin romanization system, and I can always tell if the word is a pinyin because it has one of those weird characters, accent characters on top of it. Tone characters, as it were. So anyway, that's the whole thing, really. And what it's really doing, when I hit something new, if I hit something that's already exists there, it'll just read it off the disk. But when I hit something new, it goes over to this website that is really nice. Where is that baby? This little Chinese dictionary in it. And so this is the thing that I normally used to use. And it was just, really hard to do because I wasn't just hitting enter, I had to type in stuff, and it was just a real pain in the butt. So, but yeah, basically I grab this table with pquery, and then I grab all the rows that are, greater than the first row, and then I put all the data into YAML data structure. So let me show you that code that actually does that, and I think you'll recognize it. It's pretty simple. Okay, great. Very simple. So we take the URL that I generate. Now I get the search. Here's the URL. It's the base URL. I get the term. I've set the search type to be Pinyin, English, or Chinese. And then I just create a pquery object, which goes and fetches that. I find the first table. I find all of the TRs again greater than 0. And then for each of these, I go and I grab the TD data, which I'm finding out of the pquery object that's handed me, and grab the text out of that, put it into a YAML data structure, and then that's it. Oh, pretty cool. So, yeah, that's pretty much that. And then, of course, I save all these files back to SVK, so I can actually do a SVK status here. It's, yeah, so these are, you can see all the new ones that I added, and I think I have some Vim binding to just shove it all back to SVK when I'm ready. So, pretty cool. Any questions on Zhongbei or that stuff? You guys really, anybody here know Perl? Am I in the wrong room? Okay. You've used it? Oh yeah, that guy. He's always showing up here and there. Not sure what he knows, but.
あとすいません、もし質問があれば通訳しますので、よろしくお願いします。
All right. So jQuery has one thing that Perl doesn't really have. I mean, it's not Perl's fault, really. It's just nobody got around to doing it. And that's basically, it has a real DOM. So when I went to go create this pQuery thing, I'm like, well, I need the standard DOM, but there really wasn't any standard DOM in Perl. But I looked at HTML tree builder, and in the kind of the Perl way, it wasn't a true DOM, but it was really pretty darn useful. And text nodes in it are just strings, and since strings don't really act as Perl objects in Perl, then it's hard to really make them be standard DOM in that way. But I'm like, well, that's just a small little wart. I'm going to go ahead and wrap that. So I wrote pQuery DOM, and it really is underneath. It's just a subclass of HTML tree, but it adds in a few standard DOM methods, so jQuery, JavaScript people can kind of come over and use it, and it's turning out, I think, in my experience anyway, that JavaScript people and Perl people are becoming the same people. So it's kind of cool. So let me show you this DOM thing. So here's a little example. The pQuery uses pQuery DOM for all of its stuff, but you can just use pQuery DOM without pQuery if you want to as well. And you create a DOM just by saying from HTML, hand it some HTML. So in this case, we'll create a div. And then the coolest thing I thought was that I added the inner HTML. So anybody who programs JavaScript knows that before jQuery, the coolest thing was inner HTML, right? I mean, it's like you can just grab some HTML string and you shove it in with this one method, or I don't even know what it is, but it's built in. And it just works. And then so it's a getter setter. If you want to get all of the inner HTML, you just get it, and then if you pass it back into some other place, it just sets it. And it's doing a hell of a lot of work under the hood, but it's really simple. So that's kind of how jQuery is at a certain level. So in this case, we're creating an outer div object, and then we're going to set the inner HTML to I like pie, and then we'll just print out the DOM to HTML. So I'll run that, and it's not too exciting. That's what the HTML looks like inside. But since we're in Vim, we can just actually put in this little line to remind me that, why don't we go ahead and look at the dump of the DOM. So XXX just dies with a YAML dump of whatever you give it. So we'll run this, and we can see that this really is a DOM structure, a DOM tree, so it's pretty cool. Very easy to use. And I would suggest using pQuery DOM if you just want to use DOM stuff, even if you don't end up using pQuery. So if you're a DOM JavaScript programmer, a lot of these will look familiar to you, except for the first two, the from HTML and to HTML, I kind of added. To HTML is kind of like outer HTML, which is only an IE specific thing, but cool. The inner HTML, you often want the container that you're actually at, the DOM element that you actually have, not just what's inside of it. So to HTML gives you that as well. Inner HTML does exactly what the DOM does, and all the rest of these do as well. So create element, create comments, get element by ID, get elements by tag name. All of these are very familiar to the DOM programmer. Here's some attribute stuff, some stuff for dealing with children. Now here was the interesting part, was like I said before, if you're traversing the tree, you're really going to get screwed up, because as soon as you hit a text node, which is just stored as a string, in JavaScript it's stored as an object and you can get the next child, but as soon as you get to the child that's a string, you're going to puke. So you can traverse other ways. It's just an array, so you can blip through them all that way. Or I added these things down here, so you can actually just... jQuery is interesting because in all of its result sets, it never considers text nodes. It kind of just weeds those out. So it's always dealing with things that have tags, element nodes. And this basically does the same thing. Allows you to go to the next thing that's not a text node and the previous thing that's not a text node and the first and the last of those. So any questions on that? I guess I'm going to say no. That's my guess. No questions. Okay. So this is the last thing, which is good because we're down to the last few minutes, right? That's right. So JavaScript has all these modules these days. Back in the day, it just used to be little stuff embedded in HTML tags and whatnot. Now it's fully qualified JavaScript modules. Sometimes they have tests and all the things that you would see in a standard Perl module. So where do all these modules get stored? Well, they get stored in all kinds of places, but I say they get stored in CPAN. That's where you store modules. So, okay. So for a while, people were putting JavaScript modules on JSON, and the JSON project, which Casey started over there, was actually really successful in getting a lot of the standards going for these type of modules. They have standard test suites. The cool thing about them is you can actually go to the test suites and run them in the browser because they're JavaScript, you know. And they work just like test more with your, okay, fail, that kind of stuff. And then they work like test harness in that they'll run each of the files and you can run them in verbose mode and that kind of stuff. But in terms of like all the other stuff that goes along with CPAN, I mean, CPAN just offers so much more than any other project could because it's been around for so long. So I'm like, well, I thought about it for a while, and I'm like, would it make sense to just put these on CPAN? And my answer was yes. And then I started looking into it a little bit more, and I realized that anything that you put in the lib directory gets of a Perl module gets installed into your site Perl tree. So it's not going to make any difference if we have some JavaScript files that are stored in a site lib tree. They're not going to screw up any Perl stuff. And then I wrote this module called js.pm that kind of gives you the basic backbone support and a nice command line tool for dealing with this. So, and then I put up actual these two modules onto CPAN. I didn't want to just start flooding CPAN with JavaScript, but I put jQuery up there because I use that everywhere, and I put up this YAML module that I wrote because I use that everywhere. So now I have them whenever I need them in a project. They're just there on my machine, or I can install them using the CPAN shell. And I can also list in other projects modules. I can make them require these JavaScript components, just as like I would have them require another Perl module. So I'm going to show you really quickly, get out of the editor. I have this thing called JS CPAN, and this comes for free with the JS module. And when I run it, it just tells me everything that's installed on my machine. And if I want to see exactly where jQuery is installed, well, that'll find the right thing. And then if I really wanted to go actually copy this file, so I could say, copy this to here. And now I have this, and I could just start using it. And I use make files a lot of times to generate all of my JavaScript for a project, so I just put in a line like this to pull in jQuery, and I'm all good to go. So, yeah. Make sure that's catted out. There we go. So that really is jQuery. And any questions? No? Okay. Thank you very much. Seriously, did anybody have any questions on all that? Impress your classmates.